Hey everybody, so we are getting ready to go on an adventure. I am going to attempt to go out at least, to the movies for the first time since, oh my gosh, it had to be maybe February. I know I went and saw The Invisible Man in the theaters, so I think that might be the last movie I saw. We're going to go ahead and try to see Tenet today. We will give it a go. I am on my way. I will turn the camera around and let you look at a little bit of scenery, and then I'll check in when we get to the theater. Well, hey everybody. I've got my semi-Black Lodge mask on and ready to go in. Behind me is the luxurious Cineplanet 15 theaters in Madison, Alabama. Let's see what we've got. If I'm able to film inside a little bit, I will try, but don't hold your breath. Let's see what they got showing here. Bill and Ted, David Copperfield, New Mutants, Unhinged, Jurassic Park, Jumanji, The Next Level, New Mutants, and Trolls World Tour still showing. It's absolutely desolate in here. Nobody is here. Nobody. All right, everybody, I am just back from the movie, and first of all, the movie-going experience was fine. I think all said and done, there was probably 10 or less people in the theater, so very easy to keep social distancing. So as far as that goes, it was fine. I sat up towards the back so no one could sit behind me or breathe on me or, talk over me or anything, even though that didn't really seem like that was going to be a problem. Anyway, on to Tenet, 2020. Christopher Nolan. This has basically been one of the most anticipated movies of the year. One that they definitely never were going to have as a digital release. That was definitely a given, I think. For the longest time, he kept pushing for the original release date a few months ago, but they finally pushed it back. And I think it's still only limited or just kind of starting to preview. It's kind of weird that it's a Monday release for most people. I don't quite understand that. I don't know if that's considered a preview for the weekend or I don't know. Anyway, it's Monday night and I went and saw Tenet. So basically, you've got Christopher Nolan. Let me give you the main cast members. It's Kat, played by Elizabeth Delsecki. Neil is Robert Pattinson. You've got the protagonist, kind of your main star you've seen in most all of the previews, and that's John David Washington. And then you've got Andre Sator. The character is played by Kenneth Branagh. So that's kind of your main characters in this movie. So, long and short of it, I did not like this movie very much at all. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about why. First of all, it's a very confusing movie. Now, that doesn't mean I don't mind a movie that's mind-bending or that makes you really think or makes you try to decode it. But this movie seems like it's unnecessarily complicated. And what is complicated is a pretty simplistic idea. So in other words, I'm sure you could decode all of this visually and narratively and plot-wise, but I think all you'd get out of it would be much less than the process to get there, as opposed to maybe a David Lynch or something where you decode it all or try to figure it all out. You can get rewarded with an extra meaning on top of what you're already getting, whereas this is almost all plot. So understanding the plot is kind of the point in itself, as opposed to there being an overall emotional arc or character arc or so on and so forth, in my opinion. Now, let me get a few of the reasons that it bugged me in this movie especially. Number one, this is really just a glorified James Bond movie. It's really a James Bond movie at its heart. So if you go into it thinking that, you're going to be disappointed because it's not a James Bond movie. James Bond movies are corny, They're pretty simple. They have really bold and broad characters. They've got, lots of, beautiful locales. But they don't get super complicated and heady. They just let you have fun with it. Whereas this is like taking all of those things that are in a James Bond movie and making it less fun. You have a guy that's like James Bond, that's the protagonist. He is essentially great at everything. You don't know exactly why. You kind of get a little bit idea that he's been trained militarily, but he's just like the best of the best of the best. He can do everything. You never feel he's really in danger. And there's a bad guy, which is basically the Kenneth Branagh character. And he's got some plot to, destroy the world, essentially. And then it's just, James Bond going on all these locations trying to stop the bad guy from destroying the world. That's it. It's as simple as that. That's the whole movie. It's not, and it wraps it up in a very complicated, flashy, and I could be up for the flashy if the flashy was interesting, but it really isn't. So let's get into that a little bit. Okay, so everyone knows there's a big time reversal aspect to this movie, the ability to reverse and forward. There's a lot of multiple things happening in scenes where time is going forward and backwards at the same time. But a lot of times it's not really to any real important effect. There's one scene where they cross over in a way that makes an impact on the plot. But most of the time it just makes the scenes more confusing. And honestly, for all the technical wizardry, it isn't really to me that impressive, because the backwards stuff just looks like backwards photography. So really the impressive part comes where you have the two things happening at once in a scene, but I didn't really care. And why did I not care? Okay, I'm sorry, I might be rambling on this. I just saw the movie and I didn't really write my ideas down. Number one, exposition, exposition, exposition. Characters are constantly telling you what's happening or what this means, and trying to give everything through plot exposition. The problem is the exposition isn't even clear and understandable. You take that and even add a level of less understanding to it by having it often being told to you by a character wearing a mask, to the point that I thought it was Nolan parodying himself. They always talk about how a lot of times his characters have masks and it's hard to understand them, Bane being the most obvious one of those. Here, there are multiple characters. I mean, at least 10 or 20 times characters are telling you things, and a lot of times it's supposed to be important information from a mask. Hard enough to understand them behind the mask. This is a movie that's in English that should have subtitles, because you can't understand half the time what they're saying. Now you add to that the soundtrack, the sound design is horrible. It's this super bombastic, loud, really booming music and sound effects. And then in the midst of that, you'll have a character mumbling exposition from behind a mask. And you're like, what is happening? Okay, now take that aside. That's one negative. Another negative is the action isn't that good. As complicated and as technical and as everything as it is, the action is not good. Now, why do I say it's not good? I mean, that's pretty subjective. Everyone could have different views of what they think is good action. Well, to me, to have the basis of a good action scene, you have to know, the layout, the geography of the area, what's happening, so you know who's doing what and where and when. And then you have to have a clear set of stakes. Who's trying to get what, or who's trying to stop what, or who's trying to make what happen. You have those two things, you get a really good action scene. And then on top of that, you can make it even more stylish and more interesting. Obvious great action set pieces would be like Indiana Jones, where you know exactly what's going on, you know who's doing it, you know what the stakes are, you know what they're trying to accomplish or trying to stop from happening. And I would say pick any Indiana Jones action sequence in any of the films, and I'm including Crystal Skull, any of them, pick the worst one and it's better than any of them in this movie, any of the action scenes in this movie. Now on top of that, it's just confusing as hell. Everything's going backwards and forwards. Sometimes you have multiple versions of the same characters. You don't know what they're trying to actually accomplish. There's a big giant like kind of a battle sequence in here where you got people going forward and backwards. You're not sure who's trying to do what and when and what's happening. Sure, you could decode it, but it doesn't really matter because it's not that important what they're doing. It's just kind of basic. It's basic stuff in a flashy costume. What I was thinking about as I was watching this, and this will kind of lead towards the end of this, I was thinking that this is kind of the movie equivalent of a really technically great guitar player who can't write very good songs. Now, I'm not saying Nolan can't write a good song. I'm not saying Yngwie Malmsteen can't write a really good song. But most of Yngwie Malmsteen's songs are not very good. They're just technically very, very proficient and flashy. But the music isn't any good. And that's the same thing here. You can technically see all the stuff he's doing. It's got all the practical effects. He's got a plane crashing into something. He's got multiple things flying around and things going forwards and things going backwards. But it's confusing and it's not fun. Oh, that's the other thing. It's not fun. This movie should have fun. With the gimmick of the backward stuff, I can imagine this being done by somebody like Verhoeven, or pick your action like weird 80s director. Verhoeven would have a hell of a fun time with this, and he would make it much more understandable what's going on, and he would use it for a really fun effect, and you'd get craziness, you'd get violence, and you'd get fun. This is not fun at all. It's not as fun as most James Bond movies are, and James Bond movies are generally pretty mediocre. So I would say, at best, this is a 3-star movie for me, but because of the amount of technical ability and the amount of money and the amount of, they have everything going for them. This production has every possible advantage, and to have that and to produce this, I take a star away because they should have made something better. So it's 2-star movie for me. 2-star. That is it. There are many other movies right now with way lower budgets, way more fun, way more entertaining, way better characters. Don't waste your time. Go back and watch The Dark Knight 2 more times and forget about this movie. All right, I'll have a better movie for you later this week that also is coming out and is much lower budget and much more fun, and I would give a higher star than this giant, bloated, confusing, loud mess of a movie.